Automatically. Ridiculous. I'm just checking on OBS here. It looks like I am now pushing through audio. Sorry, everybody. You know what happened? This is good news. Sometimes when I've been doing these live streams, it's cut out. It's been really frustrating. Well, it was always going off of Wi-Fi down here. This is sort of my downstairs studio. And for whatever reason, this computer's like Ethernet card or whatever was just not working that well with the Wi-Fi. So Chrissy very kindly got the hardware to physically like connect this to our internet. So it shouldn't really ever drop at this point. But we were working on the computer and I unhooked my microphone and so just totally forgot to plug it back in. Nice to have so many people here. Thank you. I've been very low energy this week. I'm kind of behind on making the next comic tropes. I'm just like, I'm fighting some severe depression. And today I was like, oh, you know, one thing that always sort of helps me feel better is to just chill out and draw. It makes me feel better. So I was sketching the Mandalorian here based off this figure. And it was coming out pretty cool. So I was like, oh, I should live stream this. Yeah, I'm really just doing this for sort of mental health, I guess you could say. And I'm happy to take any questions as well. Very nice to have a bunch of people here. Thank you very much. And yeah, so feel free if you've got a question or anything like that to hit me up, and I'll do my best to answer as many as possible. And you know, I don't think the episode will be ready like first thing tomorrow. It might be ready by the end of the day. I mean, I'm trying to get it out for this long weekend, you know, and I think it'll be a really good episode, but I just, it's really hard to sort of sit down and focus on it right now. Drawing is much more relaxing for me. So yeah, just sort of thought I'd work on that. And I've got most of this figure sort of laid out here, but I was gonna, you know, I haven't done this since like I was learning how to draw in the 90s or something when there were speed lines and everything. I'm gonna add some speed lines to this guy. So I've got my vanishing point figured out over here, and I'm just gonna start dropping in some motion. And I hope it doesn't ruin it. I hope it looks cool instead of dumb, but we'll see. We'll see. So, what is everybody up to? I'm not a patron, but can I still buy a Comic Tropes pin? It really is an exclusive that I created for my patrons. This is what Shane is talking about. Let me pop mine off because I happen to have one on. That said, it's not hard to get one. As soon as it doesn't matter what tier you pledge at. Whenever you've pledged $25, I will mail one out. So, yeah, I made these Comic Tropes pins, and they're really nice, thick enamel. This is like a glitter red for the font. They're pretty nice. They seem to be appreciated. So, you know, you could always support me on Patreon, like with a one-time donation if you really wanted to just buy one and then just cancel it. But yeah, that was something I created specifically to reward my patrons, because they are people that are really like helping me get through everything. Any favorite new creators you're excited about? Yeah, there definitely are some new creators that I'm excited about. You know whose artwork I really love, and it even partially inspired this drawing session right now? Daniel Warren Johnson, who has done like Murder Falcon, among other things. I think he did Extremity with Skybound. He's an artist that really excites me. So maybe I should do an episode on something like that. It was exciting to sort of learn about Donny Cates because I've enjoyed a bunch of his stuff. That was kind of recent. What other like sort of recent things have I tried? I'm not sure off the top of my head. I'm drawing on one of those sketch covers I started a year ago. Awesome. I can't remember the last time I drew speed lines. I know it feels like something that like has fallen out of favor. I mean, it is sort of a weird comic book shorthand for showing something, but they can look really cool when there's lots of them. It's definitely not something Bernie Krigstein would have done, but I like them when they're done right. So we'll see. DWJ streams on YouTube. Oh, very cool. I'll definitely check that out then. Daniel Warren Johnson's like so talented. I follow him on Twitter, and he'll post Star Wars stuff because I think he just gets commissions or he just likes Star Wars, and god damn, it looks exciting. I may not take the time to ink this one. I may just sort of like tighten up the pencils on this and just sort of chat with everyone. We'll see. Honestly, I need to get some better inking supplies because my stuff's all sort of running dry. It's frustrating. Let's see. A lot of comic book characters wear capes so you can tell when they're moving. Yeah. It's honestly a really good idea to indicate motion. In fact, on this little sketch, like, I'm drawing from like something where his cape is just sort of draping here, but I sort of drew it to be flowing and even like added like tattered edges over here to just sort of indicate some of that motion. I hope that comes across. I don't know. So it makes a lot of sense when you think about like, oh, is a cape practical in the real world? Well, step back, because comic books were trying to tell a story in a specific medium. So how can they express that? Well, they can express it with things like capes so that they can show motion and action and activity. Let's see. I prefer leaves, small debris, etc. Yeah, I can understand that. There's not necessarily anything realistic about speed lines. They're definitely sort of a... well, it's a comic book. There's a word for it in comic books when you have things that don't really exist in the real world but express, like motion or emotion. Things like sweat popping off of somebody's head, or speed lines. There's a word for that, and it's not coming to me, unfortunately. Cool thing about the Mandalorian is you don't have to draw a face. Well, I could. We know what he looks like. We, the audience. So I could like draw. What's his name? Something like Din Djinn or something like that. I'm just guessing. But yeah, it's not about looking right. It's about looking right, not being right. Yeah. He's just like Iron Man. Maybe a few less gadgets on this guy than on Tony Stark. But yeah, a little less armor, I guess. But he's cool, man. I really enjoyed The Mandalorian. That was a fun show. I'm looking forward to seeing the next season. It's made me curious whether I should watch Clone Wars, just because I know that, one of the producers and writers on it, Dave Filoni, oversaw that show, and I think he's bringing in some of the ideas that he had there. But I've never seen Clone Wars. Well, I've seen like 1 or maybe 2 episodes, but I don't really know the whole story. I don't know some of the original characters or ideas. So, yeah. I feel like maybe that's something I should look into. That's interesting. Look at this. I almost was about to line something up with the underside of the ruler, and I was like, I could just look at it and say, wait, that would intersect my speed lines. You got to use the same side consistently. Otherwise, it's not going to look right. Got to use the top. Space Western. Yeah, The Mandalorian's sort of a space Western, but it also it is very Western. It also has a lot of samurai overtones, samurai story overtones. So I like that. Although you could argue that in many ways Westerns are sort of an American way of telling a samurai story, but there are some differences as well. Cowboy Bebop, but Star Wars. A little bit, a little bit. I mean, he is a bounty hunter going from planet to planet, so there's a little bit of that. I love Cowboy Bebop. Mandalorian is the best Star Wars work since the original trilogy. Well, it's definitely way up there for me. I sincerely enjoy it. I don't collect, for instance, like Star Wars figures, but I got this one just because I liked the idea of having sort of a physical representation of the character that I liked. So yeah, let's see. They're going to have live action Ashoka Tano in the next season of The Mandalorian. Yeah, and I don't really know that character, so that's why I'm like, well, maybe I should watch things like Clone Wars so that I can understand the background a little bit more. I'm sure I don't need to, but maybe I should, just for I don't know. Like I say, like, I tried to watch the very first episode of Clone Wars, and it was not bad in any way, but it was also like, it was aimed really young. There wasn't like, it wasn't that like engrossing to me. So I'm like, yeah, how much do I have to watch until, like, you know, there's sort of an arc to the storyline? You know, how many sort of throwaway stories do I have to sort of sit through? It's not super psyched about that idea. You've got a lot of Star Wars figures. I used to. Not when I was a little kid. I didn't have many of the original Kenner figures. I had a few, but I seriously only had like 8 or something like that. I did not have many. But I did have... I did start getting them in the 90s, just for fun. And at a certain point, I realized that it was way too much to keep up with. I was just like, I'm out. I don't want to break my bank on this. And then when I moved across the country about 6 years ago, I just gave them away to a couple who just had a kid. And I said, when he gets older, you know, give him all these action figures. So I just wanted to have less stuff, and it made me happy to know that it was going to someone who would probably enjoy it, maybe even more than I do, even if they're not good. You know, I just had them all boxed up, essentially, so the idea of them going to a kid that would play with them made me happy. Look up the Clone Wars episode guide. Yeah, maybe that's a way to approach it. Like, they could just tell me which ones, you know, sort of watch. Did I see when Red Letter Media destroyed 30,000 Star Wars figures? I know they've destroyed stuff, and I think I've watched everything by Red Letter Media. I'm not sure I remember them destroying like 30,000, but yeah. Did you ever go to Mr. Big Toyland on Moody Street in Waltham? No. Have to admit, I don't think I ever went there. I did grow up in Massachusetts, so I don't know that store. When I was growing up in Massachusetts, there was a chain of toy stores there. It was called Child World, but I didn't have a Toys R Us nearby. But Child World was pretty big, pretty cool. That was exciting, but it went out of business like maybe when I was in middle school or something like that. It's hard to remember when. That was a cool place. I miss it some days. Like, I'll feel nostalgic for it. They had a mascot called Peter Panda, and as a kid, I was really into Transformers and then G.I. Joe. Those were the two things that I was really into. James is going to take his Star Wars figures with him to the grave. Well, that's fine. No judgments here. Like I say, I like Star Wars. I got a lot of pleasure out of them. Here's the nerdiest thing I think I ever did in my life, guys. There was so much hype when the prequels were about to come out. The first prequel was Phantom Menace. So nobody had seen it yet, but there was merchandise coming out, and they had a midnight release for a wave of Phantom Menace action figures. And I literally got in line for a midnight release at Toys R Us all these adult nerds like ran in at once when they opened up. There was no like, here's a ticket, you come in, or 10 people at a time. And and yeah, I like ran and loaded up every figure in my arms, and I bought them all. And then I was kind of like, they had the lamest figures in that. Like, of course you got like Darth Maul and Obi-Wan Kenobi. All right, well that's cool. But then you had like a little kid Anakin. You had like all sorts of weird robots. You had this old senator that was balding called C.O. Bibble. I still remember that because I'm looking at that going like, well, what am I supposed to do with this? Why did I buy that? Coffin made out of Star Wars figures. The Red Letter Media video is called Pathetic Manchild Destroys 2,387 Vintage Star Wars Figures. You pre-ordered. I didn't know that you could pre-order stuff like that back then. I guess you always could pre-order stuff. I just, there wasn't a lot of like online internet shopping at that point. I mean, that was part of the reason people were so excited to camp out for Phantom Menace. It was like one of the last big movies before you could pre-order your tickets. But I always sort of felt like if you want to camp out for a movie, you're more into camping out than you're into the movie. I never felt that that was necessary to camp out to see it like first or anything like that. And overall, I have to admit, I didn't really enjoy the prequels on almost any level. They let me down. I wasn't super into it. But that's okay. I mean, I look back and I'm like, yeah, there's some parts I guess you can dig, but it wasn't really for me. It didn't work. I wish I was more into it, like just because I enjoy Star Wars, but no, I didn't enjoy the prequels. Sort of smudging this pencil, and that's interesting because usually it doesn't smudge too much on oh, you know what? It's not my hand. It's the underside of the ruler. For some reason, the what do you even call this stuff? I can't remember. The cork board is sort of smudging, even though my hand isn't. That's interesting because I was like going like this, so it's sort of smudged. See old Bibble. Yeah. I like Star Trek more, but I like Star Wars too. Cool. Darth Maul was my favorite. I've got about a dozen Darth Mauls. Darth Maul had a great look. He did have a great look. I didn't really... He didn't do much, though. He just sort of got into, like, 2 short fights, and that was about it. It wasn't... Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I will link some of this just for fun. I'll work on, like, the outside edges. The prequels had some good moments. Yeah, they had some good moments. I don't think that they hung together narratively very well, and the performances were not very strong for the most part. A couple exceptions. Who's the guy that played the Emperor? Ian McDiarmid. He did a pretty good job. I mean, he always kind of goes over the top for his character, but that's okay. That's who the Emperor is. I don't think Ewan McGregor was bad at all across the prequels. I thought he was one of the best parts. But I don't think Natalie Portman was too strong, and I usually think she's great, but I don't think she was too strong in those movies. I don't know. Maybe she was having trouble connecting with the material. But this is all stuff that people have talked about a million times, so I'm not trying to bore you. That Red Letter Media critique of the first prequel is really, really good. It has some great points. Chris is just saying he doesn't like the prequels because he loves sand. It's true. I actually, I mean, I did grow up on the beach, so sand that's a little different than Anakin growing up in the desert, right? Hey, my sister's here. Hey, Jean. From toy perspective, the Battlestar Galactica vehicles were pretty good. Oh, really? Yeah, I was a little too young, and I didn't have that many toys at that point, so I didn't really have anything like that. Need me some microns. Poor Padme died of a broken heart. Yeah, that's... Anyway, and then when it comes to like, the newest Star Wars movies, they're very hit and miss for me. I think as a kid I might have been able to enjoy them all, but I'm older now, and I have to admit that I didn't. I liked. See, this is going to be controversial. It shouldn't be, but I really liked The Last Jedi. That one totally worked for me. That one was really good, and I really liked Rogue One. And then I think that what was the first one? The Force Awakens. That was decent. It was kind of a retread, but it was decent. There's nothing I really would complain about that. I did not care for the finale, and I thought that the Solo movie was a little weak, but it was enjoyable enough. Well, I really appreciate so many of you being here today. Any of you like actually working, like not from home, like literally going into your place of employment? I'm just curious. I'm still on furlough, which means not working, but will eventually. A lot of people I know have been working from home this whole time. Just kind of curious if anybody's actually like working like in an office or a store or anything like that. Wow, Seed Hill, you're up so early. Top of the morning to you. Rogue One is the best of all the new movies. Rogue One, at first, when I first saw it, I was like, yeah, that was all right. But it stuck with me, and I really like Rogue One. So I've come to really enjoy and appreciate what that one offered, which was a cool sort of look in the Star Wars universe while still sort of offering something a bit new. Thank goodness. And that's why I liked Mandalorian. I thought that Mandalorian overall was like, a different vibe that still totally fit in the Star Wars universe. So yeah, Mandalorian I like. I'm a Star Wars nerd. I think you can be a Star Wars nerd without saying that you love every bit of Star Wars. There are hate cults devoted to The Last Jedi. Yeah, I know. I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, why do I like it so much when there are people that don't? But it made a lot of money. It did very well. So I don't think that there's that many mainstream people that hate the movie. Detroit's car plants. We all went back to work this past week. Wow, I didn't know that. Well, be safe. Don't let them put you at unnecessary risk, but certainly appreciate that. All that steel. We need it. I need it. I mean, I sell cars, so if you weren't making them, I wouldn't be able to sell them. I like all the Star Wars films. Okay. Still unemployed, still receiving no unemployment. Geez, that's rough. That's real rough. Did you ever read any of the Star Wars novels from the 90s? Yeah, a cool question, James. I did. And like going back to the 90s, there hadn't really been much Star Wars merchandise or presence for quite a while. After Return of the Jedi, they had like two sort of failed cartoon series, Droids and Ewoks, and two Ewoks TV movies. The Marvel comic series ended not too long after Return of the Jedi, and that was all like 83, so like, it went on for a couple more years. We went a long time before there was any Star Wars. So then all of a sudden there was this new Star Wars novel by Timothy Zahn, and I just happened to see it in the store, and I, got that, and it was a really cool story. Admiral Thrawn was a great villain, so that was a very exciting time when all of a sudden there was some new Star Wars that you felt was, thematically like Star Wars. It wasn't just nothing. It was really cool. The virus can suck, but it isn't a death sentence. Well, it is to a lot of people. With 100,000 dead in like 2 months, it's definitely a death sentence for some people. So, I say be careful. The Force is with me, and I am one with the Force. My sister's so cool. Jean made me some really cool gifts for Christmas. She's gotten good at what's called felting. I'm downstairs, and those are upstairs. Otherwise, I'd love to show them to you. And she made me Wicket, BB-8, and Baby Yoda. And they look fantastic. Really cute, small, felt creatures. Really detailed. So cool. So cool. Yeah, they had a novelization of the first Star Wars movie, and then I remember, I was young enough, that they had a second story before there was ever Empire Strikes Back. It was called Splinter of the Mind's Eye. It was... I mean, at the time, we didn't really have any other Star Wars, so we were just like, oh, okay, this is what Star Wars is about. And in retrospect, it doesn't really feel a whole lot like the rest of Star Wars, but at the time it was interesting to get more Star Wars. The media has blown up the COVID death tolls. Well, that might be possible. I get my information from things like the CDC, and all I can say is, like, by sheer numbers, it is very contagious, and just warrants being careful. Maybe like some of us, if we got sick, we're probably all young enough and healthy enough that we'd probably be okay. But if you got it and you spread it to, like, you know, your grandma or something like that, like, maybe not so good. Anybody with a disease, yeah, so... There's this song I heard, I think, like at a store or something recently, maybe at the grocery store a couple weeks ago, and it was a song I sort of remembered from, like, when I was younger, and it was, like, stuck in my head, so, you know, I looked it up and played it. It's an older song. It's called what is it called? Hold on. I'm totally forgetting what it's called. Let me look it up real quick. What's funny about it is, this is like a one-hit wonder band. And when did the song come out? Whoops. Oh, hold on. I've got something cool to show you guys too. Because Jean just texted me an image of one of the things she created, so I want to share that. Yeah, so it was a mid-'80s band called Will to Power, and what was their hit song? Okay, their hit song was Baby, I Love Your Way, which then transitioned into sort of like a synth pop version of Freebird. It's kind of weird, but it was stuck in my head, right? So I looked it up on YouTube, because I just wanted to hear it again. Sometimes you've got something in your head, and if you play it, you can sort of, like, get it out of your head. The CDC is not a private corporation. It's a government agency. Anyway, so I'm watching this music video for Will to Power, Baby, I Love Your Way. And you got to watch this thing. The lady looks like Kristen Wiig from Saturday Night Live, and the guy looks like Ben Stiller from the movie Dodgeball, like a really long mustache and wavy hair. He looked and kind of built. Oh my God, it's so funny. Oh, thank you for the coffee, Mandela. I really appreciate that. And welcome, Naj. Anyway, yeah, it's... All right, so Jean sent me pictures of what she's created, and hopefully you can see these. That's Baby Yoda. She made that out of felt. It's pretty cute, I think. And then here's Wicket and BB-8. Aren't those great? I think they're so adorable. So I've got these on my mantelpiece. So I thought that was pretty cool. My sister's very talented. I feel like growing up, I was sort of called the artist just because I draw a lot. But um, my sister's definitely super talented creatively. So she made me some really nice gifts. Thank you, Jean. I appreciate it. Well, I still trust the CDC. I mean, I guess I thought that it was part of the government. I'll look it up and double check. But, you know, I gotta trust science. If I don't, I gotta put my faith somewhere. It's good to be skeptical, but I gotta put my faith somewhere, and I'll put it in science. Now that song that I was just telling you all about is in my head. 'Cause I'm as free as a bird now. Um, Anybody watching any other comic book YouTube channels? I've learned about a few in the last several months. I've appreciated Cartoonist Kayfabe for a while. I think that they do some good stuff, and they've had some cool interviews lately. Um, it's part of Health and Human Services. That's what I thought. Okay, thank you, people. I'm like, it isn't part of the government, but anyway. So I've been enjoying Cartoonist Kayfabe here and there when I have time, and Matt Draper's also really talented. Got to meet him when I did the at-home Comic-Con. Let's see, people are watching Variant Comics, Comic Drake, Owen Likes Comics. I also met Owen Likes Comics, really smart guy. Cartoonist Kayfabe all day, every day. Casually Comics, I have to admit I don't know Casually Comics. Like I say, even though I know some of these people, I don't watch it a lot. Most of the so-called YouTube channels on comics are terrible. Well, that's, too bad, but I guess I'm fine with less competition. Anyway, but I just love comics, and I love when places find a different angle on how to approach discussing them. The way I do it is very time consuming, because I'm almost making it, or like the approach is closer to how you'd make maybe a mini documentary or something along those lines, as compared to just cracking the comic open, flipping a page, going, oh, this is interesting what they're doing here. Huh? And I'm not saying that that's a bad way to do it. I'm just saying that that's a lot less work intensive compared to what I do. Do I like Humberto Ramos' style? I definitely appreciated it when he was just breaking in. I haven't read much of it lately. He's definitely gotten more and more stylized as it's gone on. It's okay. It's not my favorite. I don't dislike it. For me, like in terms of what I prefer, I just sort of go like, yeah, it's out there. It's fine. It's what it is. I don't hunt down his work, but that's okay. Spent way too much at my local comics shop today. Went in intending to spend $10, ended up spending $75. Well, I've been spending a good amount on my comic shops as well. There's two local ones, and I've been definitely trying to do everything I can to support them, like buying back issues and trades and things like that. So it's a tough time. We gotta support them. But I'm in the process of interviewing several comic book stores across the country to get their thoughts on, what's going on and how they've handled it. I thought that would potentially be interesting for the readership to see how comic book shops are trying to handle things. My LCS is opening next Wednesday down here in Oregon. Oh, wow. Which shop is that? There's a lot of great stores in Oregon, but I really only know the ones in Portland. I like Cosmic Monkey, Forbidden Planet. There's a few other really good ones. I'm forgetting the names right now. There's one that focuses more on indie stuff. It's just not coming to me right now. But it's funny, like Portland, Oregon has a surprisingly dense concentration of comic book stores and creators. Because Image Comics just moved close to there. Dark Horse is based out of there. I don't know Geeks and Gamers. I've never heard of that channel. Wait, is it a channel? It must be a channel. It could be a podcast, is what I'm saying, but I don't know them. Cause I'm as free as a bird now. Well, this is fun to get to chat about comics and hear from people, so I appreciate it. I just got X-Men 1 to 10 to catch up. Is it good? Yeah, I think it's really good. It's still sort of world setting in a lot of ways, but I've got a lot of faith in Jonathan Hickman after reading things like Fantastic Four, Avengers, East of West. Like he sometimes can. It seems a little slow in the early going, but it's because he plans for a long arc. So you're sort of reading a lot of setup in what would be called the first act, in a sense, for several issues. But it makes you connect with the characters, you realize, in the long run, and care about and understand what the stakes are. So, yeah, I think it's something unique and very, very cool. Please don't get that stuck in my head. Let's see. I wanted to ask, do you have any interesting family history? Interesting. I mean, I don't have, like, any celebrities or anything in my family history that I know of. I admire my family. They've successful, smart people that I loved my grandparents, for instance. I think that, like, there's a lot of smart people in my family. I would say that the closest thing to interesting that, like, somebody who doesn't know anything about me or my family is probably the work that my grandfather from my mother's side did. Very smart guy, a nuclear physicist, worked for a lot of big companies, worked on the very first computer, UNIVAC, helped create that. Worked for the government on the Manhattan Project. Don't know exactly what he did there. He never wanted to talk about it. Don't blame him. Very, very smart guy. Created a lot of sort of patents, but really more for companies that he worked for, not like for himself or anything like that. But yeah, he was very, very smart. Didn't necessarily make him always I loved him, but he wasn't always fun to be around growing up, because he liked to debate and be right, and he liked to teach. He had been a teacher at, like, Yale for a number of years, and so, like, I'm a little kid and he's trying to teach me about, like, white noise and things like that, and it was crazy. So that's about all I can think of. Just watched Joker before this. Joaquin Phoenix is great, but the movie was not good. Totally agree. Yeah, it's a very good performance, but it's nothing I hadn't seen before, like, done better by Martin Scorsese. So yeah, I didn't ultimately care too much for Joker at all. Wish I did. Definitely a good performance, but it's a story that's been told before and told better. He worked for Howard Hughes. Oh, okay. See, Jean knows even a little bit more about our family history. I'd almost call her the family archivist. She knows more about, like, she remembers more about, like, our family tree, and she has, like, a lot of the photos and stuff from our family, our various family photo albums. So Jean knows a little bit more. That's interesting. So I guess I didn't remember that he worked for Howard Hughes. That's kind of awesome. Wow. So, smart guy. Worked on a lot of things that people know about, but was sort of one of the quiet people that you never like heard about. But, you don't work on that many big projects like, the first computer and the nuclear bomb and Howard Hughes. You don't work for that many people without being like really, really smart. He was really, really smart. And it was intimidating sometimes. Didn't make him smart about like everyday common sense, but like on a technical level, like, and in terms of like if he wanted to understand something, he could. So, yeah, very impressive. Very impressive. Howard Hughes would be in heaven right now because of the quarantine. Maybe. Oh, because he'd just like, well, I don't think he could deal with this very well. That's for sure. The man did not like germs. That was a Scorsese movie, wasn't it? The Aviator with Leonardo DiCaprio. That was a good movie. DiCaprio made a lot of good movies with Scorsese. One of my favorite directors, I think. Who are some of your favorite directors? I love film. I really do. If I wasn't doing a show about comic books, which is definitely my first and biggest love, I'd probably be doing a show about movies. I love film. And I think the unifying factor there is visual storytelling. So I like visual storytelling. Grandma's mom was Vincent Price's nanny. Oh, that's a cool little bit of trivia. Grandma's mom was Vincent Price's nanny. Scorsese doesn't like comic book movies. That's okay. Favorite Tarantino movie? Good question. I do like probably Inglorious Bastards. I think it has the most setups of cat and mouse, like people trying to figure out like who the other person is, and yeah. People like Taika Waititi. I've enjoyed him since the first thing I saw by him was called, I think Eagle versus Shark. And it was so quirky and weird that I was like, oh, I want to. I followed more Jermaine Clement, who was the star, but I would follow Taika Waititi as well. And of course, now he works in like comic books and Star Wars, which is sort of a cool, unexpected surprise of somebody whose career you've been following to like start getting into stuff that you really like. But Akira Kurosawa, Akira Kurosawa is amazing, just spectacular. Who knows what film would be without his influences? I really like Seven Samurai. Maybe that sounds cliche, but I do. I really like Seven Samurai. Yeah, I agree. Tarantino, it does seem to have a huge ego, and like as a person, he's not great, but I do appreciate how everything means something in his films. He's at least going for something. And I've enjoyed pretty much all of his movies, so yeah. Seen them all in the theater. My favorite might be Stanley Kubrick. It's weird. Iron Shell has seen Seven Samurai. Ridley Scott or George Lucas? Sure. They've definitely both made some good movies. I like auteurs where, the film could only really be made by them. And you know that it's by them. I do like that. There's not many around anymore. It's not a director system. It's not a studio system. It's sort of an algorithm these days where they just plug in people that we like, okay, and they make them into stars. All the Marvel movies that have become a success. It's not like Robert Downey Jr. was a name, but he wasn't like an A-list movie star when they hired him for Iron Man. And plugging in guys like Chris Pratt or Chris Hemsworth, they weren't huge stars at all, but they definitely become pretty big stars. 2001 is incredible. I think 2001 is my favorite Kubrick movie. I think so. I like it a lot. When Mandela Butterfly says his favorite director is Alan Smithy, that's a joke. Basically, if somebody directed a movie and then wanted to take their name off of it, like they weren't proud of it, they wanted to not be associated with it, the union rules were that they could replace it with this fake name called Alan Smithy. So it's a name associated with lots of not great movies. Wertmuller and Fellini, well, total respect for that. Total respect. Oh, people were talking about Uwe Boll. Oof. I've never liked any of his movies, although I will admit that at a certain point I stopped giving any of them a try. I was like, nope. Not so good. I think Chrissy has just set up our Nintendo Switch in one of the other rooms. I think I hear her playing. Oh, but you know what? I know that she won't be doing it full until she picks this up. She wants to play Ring Fit. Anybody else get Ring Fit? It looks fun. Looks like a cool way to exercise. Chrissy? Can you hear me? Guess not. Put that there. Ellen and Alan Smithy are my parents' names. Your dad has directed a lot of interesting movies. Tarkovsky, yeah. The Russian director of things like, what are some of his movies? Was Sunshine one of them? And I've seen a few Tarkovsky things. My friend Jeff is a big admirer of his work and had all of like his stuff, especially the Criterion Collection editions. There's a lot to admire about him. Marijuana and Newports, huh? Solaris. Not Sunshine. Sunshine is that British director. Solaris is what I was trying to think of. Actually, the American remake of Solaris isn't bad, but the original Russian film is, yeah, that's something pretty unique and weird and trippy. You have to be very patient. Very patient. If you thought that like something like 2001 requires patience, you haven't sat through Solaris, the original. Read any good comics this week? Great question. This is a comic book channel, isn't it? What did I read this week? I finished the first hardcover of Berserk, so I need to order the next one. I want to continue that story, see where that guts ends up. I got back issues. I mean, of course, because what else am I going to be getting right now? I got DC Rebirth #1. That was kind of an interesting setup of stuff. It seems to mention the idea of 3 Jokers, so maybe that'll become an investment. I don't know. What else did I read? I read, well, I got the first Star Wars by Marvel from back in 1977. That was pretty cool. I was definitely happy with that. Let's see. What else did I read this week? Oh, I got the last 2 issues of Superman before Crisis on Infinite Earths rebooted it, which Alan Moore wrote and was illustrated by Kurt Swan. Great comics. So that was pretty cool to pick up. I got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles '96, which is the first appearance of Jennika. She's an interesting character, so I like that. First appearance of Jennika as a Ninja Turtle, I should say. Oh, Hayao Miyazaki. Sure, of course. Great director. On a somewhat related note, the Ghibli Museum in Mitaka, Japan, is a beautiful museum, first of all, but also doesn't allow photography. So that's why it's exciting that a couple weeks ago, they launched an official YouTube channel, and they show like 30-second to a minute-long clips of the museum. And it is a beautiful museum, just a beautiful, wonderful place. So, if you like Miyazaki at all, I would definitely recommend finding the Ghibli Museum YouTube channel and watching some of those really beautiful short videos to see the museum. I've been there and it was fantastic. It was really special. Just a really unique, wonderful place. When I go to Japan, I prefer Kyoto. Kyoto's pretty amazing. Definitely underrated because it's almost as big as Tokyo. I mean, it's a big major city, but maybe a little less crowded and a little less hustle and bustle. Some gorgeous parks, some gorgeous temples, and some cool modern day shopping. Yeah, hopefully the next time I go to Japan, I'll have some time to go to Kyoto. I would really like that. I really wish I could be going to Japan right now. A Howard Chaykin comic tropes would be fun. I did one. I could do one again sometime, but I did do one. What video games have you been playing? Not many. Mostly I've been trying to focus on, comic tropes or like sort of household improvement projects. But when I have time, there are 2 that I've been playing a little, and I do mean a little. One is The Witcher, which I guess came out 5 years ago, but it was new to me. And the other, which I only have honestly played once, and that was last night with a friend, is Predator Hunting Grounds. And that was pretty fun, at least with a friend. It's not a perfect game, but it's a good one to play with a friend. But that's about it. I intentionally don't spend too much time playing video games just because I'm trying to be productive, trying to get more exercise. Like I go for a walk pretty much every day, and working on things around the house, like really the outside of my house, like to improve how it looks, just weeding and gardening, mowing the lawn, weed whacking, hedge trimming. And I've got a koi pond that requires a bunch of care. So, yeah, super exciting, huh? I know how to party. If you have a Switch, I recommend Snipper Clips to play with another person. I do have a Switch. Can't even remember the last time I played it. But I do like it. Like I say, we've got like this Ring Fit game that Chrissy wants to try. We don't play a lot of video games. We watched, we do at the end of the day, watch either YouTube or Netflix or Amazon Prime together. We'll do that. Try to give some time to each other at the end of each day. What did we watch? We watched Lovebirds last night, the new Kumail Nanjiani Issa Rae movie. Pretty good. I think if I had gone to see it in the theaters, I might have felt like, I overpaid because I didn't laugh that hard. But watching it at home, I did laugh several times. So I was like, yeah, that was time well spent. That was enjoyable enough. And it was filmed in New Orleans, which is a place that I lived for several years and I love very much. It's near and dear to my heart. So it was nice to see New Orleans, which isn't shown on TV and movies a ton. I mean, it shows up, but not a ton. And then we've been watching Ozark. We're almost done with that. That's a really cool sort of crime show on Netflix. I like that. We watched Upload recently. That one didn't have that many episodes. It's on Amazon Prime. It's a sitcom. My sister Jean recommended that one to me. That was pretty good. You ever see the demo for the Youngblood cartoon in the 90s? Would have wanted to see a cartoon of Youngblood. No, I've never seen that. I went to the Frank Frazetta Museum a long time ago. The paintings were beautiful. Yeah, I've been to the Frank Frazetta Museum as well. Very special place. Got to meet his wife, who told my friends and I a lot of amazing stories about Frank's work and his process and stuff. Definitely a day that I remember very, very fondly and felt that I learned a lot and got to just see some gorgeous, gorgeous artwork. Not a humongous museum. I mean, it's called a museum. It's pretty small. It's on his property, but it is very nice, and it has several great pieces. It's really cool. It's really cool. Chris says that he stopped playing video games in his 30s because he lost interest. Wildcats, yeah, they had a cartoon. I think almost every beginning image property had a cartoon, because there was Wildcats, there was Savage Dragon. Well, maybe not, because I say that there was almost, but now there was Spawn, so there were those three, I guess, that I'm thinking of. And then technically there'd be like, what? There was never a Shadowhawk cartoon. There was never a who was the one Mark Silvestri did with this Cyberforce? There was never a Cyberforce cartoon. Have I read the book Neuromancer by William Gibson? I'm trying to remember if I did or not. I don't think I ever read that book. No. Yeah, Frank Frazetta is amazing. Really, really amazing artist. And definitely somebody that I'd love to do an episode about comic tropes someday, just because he did do a little bit of work in comics and stuff, and I think that would be interesting to discuss. He was certainly influential to many comic book artists. I guess I'm getting quiet. Maybe I'm getting tired. At a certain point, when I end this, I'm going to go back to work on the next comic tropes. I want to have that ready for you guys as soon as possible. I just needed a break, a mental health break. And so that's what this is. Just an opportunity to sort of relax. When I draw I lose track of time in a good way. My favorite character that he drew was Death Dealer, definitely. Wasn't Frank Frazetta the lead or cover artist for Epic Magazine? He definitely did covers on Epic Magazine, definitely. The Max cartoon was better than the comic. Geez, I don't really remember the cartoon well enough to compare it right now. People are talking about the Max. Yeah, the Max is definitely something unique, thanks to Sam Keith's very unique art style. But I don't know what else to say about it. I've tried to think about doing an episode before, and I'm just not sure what I have to say about Sam Keith. It makes it very tricky. I'd like to talk about him because I know I enjoyed his books in the 90s. What do you say? It's like, yeah, he was a good artist. I don't want to just do that. I want to say something, like have something to say. And for whatever reason, I just can't think of anything yet. There's so many amazing creators in comics that I'd love to talk about, but I just haven't quite cracked what I'd say because I don't want to just provide a history or a recap. That doesn't interest me. I want to have something to say, a point to make. Even if people disagree with it, I still want to like have a point. So that's if you're like, why isn't Chris covered like this person or that person? Sometimes it just means that I haven't figured out exactly what I want to say yet. Did I fall for the Baby Yoda hype? I don't know that I fell for it. I think he's a cute character, and I like The Mandalorian, is what I can say. I like The Mandalorian a lot. But if you're asking, did I go out and like buy a Baby Yoda toy or something? No, I didn't do that. Sam Keith at the time seemed to draw his women more realistically. They had hips and not necessarily like Barbie-esque superhero physique. That's one way of looking at it. I don't know that I'd call it realistic. He definitely emphasized a certain aspect that not every artist did. It's interesting to go back and see some of his earlier work on stuff like Sandman, and then see him cut totally loose on the Max. He definitely was doing what he wanted to do with that, and that's always cool to see a creator have sort of unfettered, unobtrusive. I don't know what word I'm sort of looking for here, but like just nothing in their way, nothing behind. It doesn't mean that it's good what they create, but it does mean that it's like we're getting to see what's in their mind, and that's interesting. L.C. Seeger, the creator of Popeye. Yeah, I probably will someday. I probably will cover EC. Popeye was one of the first comic strip characters to cross over into other media. Yep, very popular. Hope you're having a good night. I am. It's really cool to talk to everybody. Appreciate the questions and stuff. I'm trying to think if I should think of like a story to tell or something. I mean, I should, but what story would I tell? Nothing comes to mind off the top of my head. Bad storyteller, I guess. Just tired, really. Sam Keith and realism are not two words I usually associate. No. Mad Libs. I don't have a Mad Libs near me. That's a good idea. It's a fun idea, but I don't. Yeah. I was just making sure that there wasn't one behind me or something like that. Yeah, I don't have one here right now. How about a funny story from college? Do have lots of adventures from college, but I'm not sure if I've got a funny story. Off the top of my head, anyway. Well, I'll keep thinking. Right now, nothing comes to mind. Tell us about your first published work. What would be my first published work? Let me think. That's, alright. Let me think for a sec. I think the first thing that I had published was probably a pinup that was published in an issue of Battle Pope. That was the series that Kirkman made with Tony Moore before Walking Dead and Invincible and stuff like that. I had just drawn one online, and somehow he was able to. I wouldn't have even thought that it would be high enough resolution to print well, but it printed well. He just grabbed it and surprised me by printing it in the back of an issue. So that was like technically, I think, my first published work. A sketch in the back of an issue of Battle Pope. I really couldn't remember which one off the top of my head, but yeah. So that was definitely exciting at the time. You know, I'd never had anything published, so that was. And I really liked Battle Pope, so that was a lot of fun. And after that, it would, be more pinups and Kirkman stuff, as well as like self-published comics. Yep. Let's see. New Gods was definitely Kirby's magnum opus. New Gods is something special. Who's an underrated artist writer you think deserves more recognition? Underrated. Well, the guy I was talking about earlier tonight, Daniel Warren Johnson, I think, should be an absolute superstar, and for some reason isn't quite. That's a guy that I think deserves more attention than he's gotten so far. Somebody that definitely has plenty of success but still deserves more attention is Jason Latour. He has a YouTube channel called The Drawl, and he does interviews with other comic book creators. It's a really interesting look at peeling back the layers of the creative process. I think it's really cool. Better twin, Tomax or Zaymot? Zaymot, because it's cooler to start with an X. Actually, which twin has the scar? I can't remember, but that one should be the cooler one. Good questions. Frank Miller did lose his mind, but he seems to have kind of recovered. He definitely seems a little more with it, and I think he's apologized for a bunch of the comments that he's made in the past. So, yeah, there's a different Frank Miller out there now. More like the old Frank Miller. Would like to see a King Features Syndicate animated universe with the Phantom and the Katzenheimer kids and Popeye. Ooh, okay. Shared universe, huh? Well, why not? I love the King Features characters. I'd love to see a Defenders of the Earth turned into a movie. Okay. Okay, and somebody's mentioning, Captain Negativity is mentioning the original Drink and Draw Social Club. Yeah, that was pretty cool. Or not was. You know what? I don't know if it's aired yet, but I know that their next guest was going to be Mike Mignola. Huge fan, personally, of Mike Mignola. If it hasn't aired yet, I'd love to be watching that. Hope I didn't miss it yet. Speaking of, like, comic book things that, like, stream, another thing that's been really cool for me lately is there's a local comic shop here. It's called Atomic Comics. I'm sure there's many Atomic Comics. This one's in Tacoma, Washington. And on Facebook, every Tuesday night, the owner, Shane, does a 2-hour live stream where he pulls out, like, comics from these long boxes, like really interesting key issues. Really recent stuff, really old stuff, anywhere from Golden Age all the way up until today. But they're all, like, key issues, something special. Like, like it could be, an early Batman issue, or it could be the first appearance of Punchline. You know what I'm saying? It could be anything. And it's called a live claim sale. So what it is you don't have to bid, but he'll put the comic out on display. He'll explain what it is and what makes it important. And then he'll reveal, like with a placard, the price of the comic. And if you say claim the comic name and the price, and you're the first, you get to buy it. And it's always like at a discount price. So it's been a really interesting show. If you want to, like, try to find if you just want to, like, learn about some old comics and maybe claim one, it's a really fun show to participate in. Like I say, it's Atomic Comics, and it's on Facebook. He does it on the Facebook page. So I've been participating in that, and found some really awesome key issues. Just something to think about. Yeah, it's not an auction, just to be clear. It's a claim sale. So they'll tell you just what the price is, and if you think that price is, like, because it's a great thing, because, like, he'll talk about what the comic is and what makes it special for a little while. So you'll see it, and you can, like, sort of form in your head, like, yeah, that is something I'd like, and to me that's worth $25. And so if he says, like, $18, you're like, boom, I'm gonna claim it. So you don't have it's not quite the same as an auction, but it's fun. It's just a really fun show to participate in. Some other people that watch my channel have joined in, and they've sold comics to people in other states, and very fast delivery. Just a fun show to watch, though. Just a fun show to watch. So yeah, let's see. Summarizing things that are worth watching. There's Drink and Draw. There's The Drawl. There's Cartoonist Kayfabe. There's Atomic Comics. All sorts of good things. Episode on John Romita. I'll definitely do an episode about both John Romita Jr. and Sr. Definitely. Definitely. Do you remember the first time you saw Star Wars? Yeah, I think so. I'm pretty sure that the first one I saw in the theater was Empire Strikes Back. I was pretty young, but I'm pretty sure because I definitely remember, like, I have a pretty vivid memory of, like, the Yoda swamp scene with R2-D2. So I remember that pretty well. Thanks everybody for joining me while I just doodle. I appreciate it. It's fun. Met John Romita Jr. a long time ago. I've never met John Romita Jr. I would love to. I'm a big fan of his work. Thanks, Zanmoff. Zanmoff, you must have sent in some fan art in, like, the last episode. Your name sounds familiar. Let's see. Some stuff Frank Miller can never take back, like the Spirit movie. So one thing I've started doing for my patrons is at least once a month I will do a commentary track on a bad comic book movie. At least that's what I'm starting with, and I'll probably branch it sometime into, like, sci-fi and other types of things. But that is to say that, like, the one that they all want me to cover next is The Spirit. So I probably will be covering that, like, in early June or the end of May. That should be interesting. We'll try to be nice and respectful. Ooh, not so good. He just felt like all he knew how to do was, like, make another Sin City movie, but, like, with the Spirit. It's really weird because Frank Miller was always super respectful of Will Eisner, but he did not get that right. Oh well. Let's see. It looks like I've been going for an hour and 20 minutes. I'll go for at least 10 more minutes. But eventually I'm going to take a small break. Well, not break even. I'm going to stop so that I can get back to work on the next Comic Tropes episode. I just needed some downtime, and this has been very therapeutic in its own way. The Spirit versus the Phantom. Who wins? I would say that the Spirit does, because he could get his ass absolutely handed to him in most comic strips, but he just keeps coming back. Eventually he'll just wear the Phantom down. I always thought that one weird thing about the Phantom was how he hands the title down to, like, his son. Well, maybe now that I say that, maybe I don't know him well enough. Maybe he has handed it down to somebody that isn't his son. Because I was just sort of thinking right now, like, well, what if he, like, ever got a son that just, for whatever reason wasn't too motivated and was kind of, like, fat? He was like, well, I guess this generation, the Phantom just isn't going to be that great. But maybe he handed it down to somebody that wasn't his son once. I don't know. Phantom is surprisingly popular abroad. Surprisingly. I drew you as Bloodshot. Yes, thank you very much. Sam Jones played the Spirit in a made-for-TV pilot. Did he really? You're talking Sam Jones is in like Flash Gordon? Well, there's a funny story. I met Sam Jones once. Some people will know like this little piece of history I'm about to drop. But when I first moved to Seattle, I didn't really know many people. I moved here for a job. The only person I really knew was the real-life superhero Phoenix Jones, who's in recent days been in plenty of trouble and had his own controversies. But anyway, let's shorten this up and just say that like when I had interviewed him basically, and we'd stayed in touch because he's an interesting person. And so when I moved out here, he was like one of the only people I knew. And eventually I started dressing up in costume and patrolling the city with him. So that was a thing I did. And yeah, it was a weird time, man. Keep in mind at this point, like when I did it, I think I was just like really confident in my abilities and stuff because I'd been like going to the gym for 2 hours a day every day for like about 2 years, and I'd been doing Krav Maga for a long time. So I was like really confident and you know, I justifiably so in some ways. But anyway, so I started like doing this. I started dressing up in a costume. I called myself Omega, and I went out and patrolled the city and fought crime with Phoenix Jones. And we would often get asked to do interviews with the local news and stuff. So one day, the local radio station, like whatever the biggest one was, I forget their names, but I think it was Cairo. But anyway, they had Sam Jones on, and he was promoting something like, I think like he was just like going to be a guest at maybe like a club or something. It was, I think that the reason there is, you know, he'd starred in the Ted movies, so he'd sort of gotten his name back in the limelight a little bit, and he was like, you know, opening bars and clubs and stuff like that as like a funny guest. Anyway, so they had him, and they were thinking that like since they had like this fake superhero, they'd also have a real superhero. So Phoenix and I were on the radio show with Sam Jones, just sort of telling our stories like of making arrests and chasing down people and whatnot, while Sam talked about his career and stuff. And Phoenix had a taser with him, and like the hosts really wanted to see the effect of a taser on a person, so they got like, I don't know, like their intern or something like that to volunteer to get tased. And Phoenix showed Sam Jones how to do it, and Sam Jones takes the taser and just tases the guy, and he just drops to the floor and shaking and stuff. I felt bad for him, but whatever, it was voluntary and I didn't do it. And then they just talked about what that felt like. It was entertaining. But he was really nice to us, and they took a picture of all of us that's, I believe, like somewhere on the walls if you go into their radio station. You know, they've got like all the various celebrities that they interview, and so I'm up there in costume with Sam Jones somewhere. I don't know, maybe you can even like Google it and there's something. I really don't know. It was a long time ago now, but someone mentioned Sam Jones, and that was my time meeting Sam Jones. Nice dude. Big. He was big. Very tall. Let's see. Scarlett Johansson and Sam Jackson in The Spirit. Yeah, that's true. It had a good cast. The Spirit makes Daredevil look like Godfather 2. That Ben Affleck Daredevil was not a treat. Poor Ben, because Ben is a fan of comics, and, you know, he wanted to make... Nobody wants to make a bad movie. There are still people that will say, like, oh, all you got to do is watch the director's cut. It's still a bad movie. You can re-edit a movie, and sometimes it'll be more coherent. It doesn't fundamentally make it all of a sudden a better movie. It's not like, even like when you re-edit, like, you know, a good movie, like, say, Blade Runner or something, it's not like the director's cut is somehow, like, you know, 20 times superior. It's the same story with pretty much the same scenes. It's just like one or two extra scenes cut in a different order. I've never really seen a I can't think of one anyway. Maybe I've seen one, but I can't think of like a director's cut that all of a sudden changed the meaning of a film. George Lucas made Star Wars because he couldn't get the rights to Star Wars. I'm going to rewatch the Shadow movie with Alec Baldwin. Yeah, I thought that the Shadow was. I mean, it's a little campy and stuff, but it's a decent movie. It's got a good cast. I thought that it was pretty cool. At least my memory of it is that it was pretty good. My memory of the what do you call it, the Phantom movie, I don't remember thinking that one was amazing. I didn't think it was like embarrassing, but I don't remember thinking it was really any good. I don't know. Hello, Clay. What's your take on the new upcoming Stargirl series? You know, I don't think I'll be watching it unless it's on. Is it gonna be on something other than DC Universe streaming service? Because I don't have that. It looks a little cheap, but you know, fun characters. Why did they even make an Electra movie with Jennifer Garner? I mean, she was a rising star at the time, and Sony had the rights. They'd made some money with Daredevil, so I guess they thought that people would watch anything. They just didn't put much effort in it. Dark City was awesome when I was 19. You know, I remember the first time I saw Dark City. Actually, I think I've only seen it once. I remember when I saw Dark City that I liked it. I just have never gone back and rewatched it, so I don't really fully remember it. Was Dark City directed by the same guy that did The Crow? Am I remembering that right now? I want to say like Alex Proyas. Just all of a sudden popped in my head, and I'm wondering if I'm making an actual connection or if my mind is playing a trick on me. You know what I'd love to? I'd love another Indiana Jones movie. And honestly, not necessarily with Harrison Ford, but I love that character. If they were able to capture that same sense of adventure and excitement, that would be something I'd love to see more of. I don't know. It might not be something they can capture again, but boy, that's a character I love. Alex Progs? I don't know who Alex Progs was. I guess I thought it was Alex Proyas who did The Crow, but maybe I'm not remembering that right. The Crow was a good movie. It's too bad what happened to Brandon Lee. Oh, definitely is super tragic. Super tragic. Harrison Ford is way too old to play Indiana Jones. Well, he may be. I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so Proyas was right that he directed Dark City, but did he also direct The Crow? Am I remembering that right? Okay, I got the right director, but another Tom Hardy Mad Max movie, man, sign me up. But in cool news, director George Miller did say that he's making a prequel for Furiosa, and George Miller in like the Mad Max world, cool, sign me up. It does, like, because at first I was like, I love Tom Hardy, but do I want like a Mad Max movie without Mel Gibson, who was always Mad Max? Well, it was like the best Mad Max movie. So if he wants to make another movie with like set in the past with Furiosa instead of Mad Max, as long as it's that same world, that same sort of action and stuff like that, sign me up. Oh, he did direct The Crow too, so I did remember that right. Okay, so he has a really interesting visual sense. But whatever happened to Alex Proyas then? He sort of faded away. Oh wait, Chris Marorak. Chris, I didn't even realize you were the one that helped correct me. Chris is an old friend, and we gave him the worst nickname. So I used to be part of a group in DC called the DC Conspiracy. We called ourselves that, and what we were a bunch of comic book artists and writers. We met at least once a month at this awesome bar, and just we talked comics and we made comics with each other. So I was Chris, because that's my name. Well, another Chris comes and joins the group, Chris Marorak, who's here in the chat room. And Chris was into manga. And in the first night, I think he said, like, there was a friend of ours, Becca, that used to go to these meetings, and she was like, oh, what kind of comics do you like? And he was like, well, I do like manga. And she misheard, because we are in a bar, she heard mango. She was like, you like mango? And so we started calling him Mango Chris. I was Chris, he was Mango Chris. It's not a great nickname. I hadn't thought about that in a while, Chris. For whatever reason, that just popped in my head. It's been a while since I thought of that nickname. He directed Gods of Egypt. Oh, Jesus. Okay, so he went way downhill. Gods of Egypt. Oh, I didn't even see that one, but I listened to a podcast that like broke it down, and I was like, I am glad I skipped that one. It sounded awful. Mango Chris, is that like Spacker Dave? Mango Chris would be more like Steve Dave, where somebody just didn't get the name right. Proyas did iRobot. iRobot is okay as a movie, but as an adaptation of Isaac Asimov's material, I felt like it was pretty subpar. So iRobot kind of bugged me. The thing I remember most about iRobot is the forced product placement in it. It's set way in the future, but they had like a deal with a shoe, whether it was Reebok or Adidas, I don't remember. But they had a product placement, so like they had to make Will Smith's character, he was way into like old stuff, and he got like this pair of vintage shoes, and they have this really forced line in it where his sidekick, Shia LaBeouf, is going, "Oh man, look at those shoes. Those are great Reebok shoes. Oh man, those look good." And you're just sort of like, okay, I don't really know what this has to do with the movie. Didn't have anything to do with the movie. Chris says, Evan told one of my coworkers that story when they met at Awesome Con, so a few of my coworkers started calling me that afterwards. That's great. Well, the guy he's talking about there, Evan, is our friend Evan Keeling, who's made a bunch of comic books. And Evan looked just like this guy that was like, not the bad guy, but sort of the jerk in both Ghostbusters and Die Hard 2. William Atherton. All of a sudden the actor's name came to me. William Atherton. For whatever reason, our friend Evan looks like William Atherton. So we would often call him like, oh, now I can't remember, but the name of the guy in Ghostbusters, like the EPA guy. We would call him that. I can't remember all of a sudden now. They were early to predict the rise of sneaker collectors. Well, I think that there already were sneaker collectors, but it was still pretty forced. Like, you know, you got this sci-fi movie about like a murder, and you've got like Shia LaBeouf talking about like, oh man, those shoes are great. I mean, I would love to buy a pair of those, but unfortunately, I don't live in 2004. True Genius, that's right, he was in that too. He really does look a lot like him. It's kind of funny. Younger, maybe arguably handsomer, but he looks like him. Yeah, from the scene in Ghostbusters where he goes, "Yes, Your Honor, it's true. This man has no dick." He had a career just playing jerks in movies. Walter Peck. That's what we called him. We would sometimes call Evan Walter Peck. Stupid nicknames. But fun. It's my favorite franchise. Yeah, I wish it was mine. I absolutely love the original Ghostbusters, but I can't really say that I'm a big fan of any of the Ghostbusters stuff that's come after it. Like, you know, was the cartoon okay? Yeah, it was okay. So it was probably better than okay, but I can't claim to be like a big fan of it. I didn't think Ghostbusters 2 was that good. The reboot was not that great. It wasn't. None of it was garbage. I really don't think any of it was garbage, but I can't claim that I'm a huge fan of any of it. But I love the original Ghostbusters. Love it. Fantastic movie. Fantastic. I don't think the comedy is sharper in Ghostbusters 2. It forces things like Lewis. It forces them to be underdogs again. Like, Dana all of a sudden has a completely different job. I don't know how you go from being a violinist to, like, you know, an art restoration expert. That's pretty weird. Like a painting the villain isn't quite as interesting. Although in real life, the guy that played him sure is. Oh my god, that guy was a psychopath. The guy that played Vigo, the Carpathian, in the painting. Look up his story. He was a fucking madman. He was also a bad guy in Die Hard. Another connection between Ghostbusters and Die Hard. But the thing that bothered me is Bill Murray is just checked out in Ghostbusters 2. You can tell that he just does not want to wear the Ghostbusters suit because he does not. He puts it on like once, maybe. Yeah, he does not want to be there. You know what I did like, though, within Ghostbusters? I did like that video game. That was pretty fun. As far as a video game goes, that was cool. I mean, they got all the actors back to play themselves, which is cool. It was a pretty fun game to play. So I did like that. I need to clean up some of this underlying pencil work that I did at this point so that I can see what needs detail and what doesn't. So I got my trusty kneaded eraser. I'm going to start cleaning some of this upper body up. But yeah, if you ever want an interesting story, read about the actor who played Vigo the Carpathian. Didn't do the voice. They got who did they get? They got that famous Swedish Max von Sydow to do the voice. Thanks for the compliment, Insurgent 222. Me? No, I don't need anything. Were you setting up the switch? Oh. Well, let me know if you need help with it. Just talking with my girlfriend, folks. If you can find love, run to it, as Patton Oswalt says. It's true. Nothing else makes life worth living. Max von Sydow played Ming the Merciless in Flash Gordon. Yep. He's been in tons of great stuff. Yeah, Max von Sydow has passed away, but he was great. He did so many great things. If you've never seen The Seventh Seal, definitely recommend that. Hi, Cat. You want to be famous? Yeah. This is Milo. Milo is 16 years old now. He's a big guy. He's a great cat. He's a good friend. Look at you squirming around. Oh, you're hungry. It's time to feed Milo. Well, you know what? I should probably call it a night then, because this drawing would take hours to still finish, but the whole point was really just to work on something and talk comics and catch up with everybody. I really appreciate all the questions. This was definitely fun, made me feel a little better, but I should also get back to work on the next comic tropes. I'll try to have it ready by the end of the day tomorrow. I think I can do that. We'll see. It's going to be an episode, though, that I think everyone will like. I think everyone will like it. So, anyway, I'm going to take off. You guys are amazing. And until I see you next time, I want you to keep reading comics. Bye.